question 5. How can one man die for the sins of the whole world? How can one man die for the sins of the whole world? How can one man die for the sins of the whole world? Now, this is one argument of skeptics, but we are addressing it now in the direction of many Muslims. Many Muslims always argue that. Now, before I continue with this, one of the fundamental issues that the Muslims have, one of the fundamental issues in the context of this subject, is the concept of original sin. Alright, but I'm not going to be addressing that today. I'll address that in BBC. Alright, because of time I can't address that, so I'll address that in Believers Bible Conference. However, the Muslims will say things like, how can one man die for the sins of the whole world? And they are saying that in two perspectives. Number one, it doesn't make sense. How can one man's death be able to suffice for the sins of the whole world? That's one. And number two, so that's where it does not make sense. And number two is that it is wicked for God to even do that. How can God inflict one man with the punishment for the sins of the whole world? Are we together? So the Quran teaches, and the Muslims actually teach, that according to the Quran, that no one will bear the burden of another person. That everybody has his own burden that is bearing, and everybody has his own judgment. But ironically, in the Hadith, it is something quite different in a way. Now, in the Hadith, I explained that what they have the Muslims, they appeal to two major sources: the Quran and the Hadiths. The Hadiths are the saints, Muhammad and Allah and so forth, that are recorded. And I said there are two foremost Hadiths, two major Hadiths. We have the Hadith Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, okay, which have thousands of Hadiths. Now, interestingly, in the Hadiths of the Quran, there's a part that says that, of course, they regard the Jews and the Christians as unbelievers. Are we together? Why the Muslims are the believers? Now, there's a part that says that that everybody has their own burden of sin and their own judgment. Are we together? But when the time of judgment finally comes, that Allah is going to take all the angels, or through the angels, is going to take the burdens of the sins of each of the Muslims that have served fervently. They'll take their bodies and their judgments and place them on the head. There's going to be a Jew that's going to stand for them to receive all their judgments, their punishment. Either a Jew or a Christian, for every Muslim. I will together. You'll see that in Sahih Bukhari, 6665, 6666, 67, 6668. Alright? So it's something that you can always confirm online. 6665, 6666, 6667, 6668 in Sahih Bukhari. Okay, let me just write Sahih. So we have the two major, we have the Sahih Bukhari and we have the Sahih Muslim. Sorry, I said Sahih, it's in Sahih Muslim, Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim 6665, 6666, 6667, 6668. So something you can always confirm. So in essence, why did I have to mention that? In essence, you see that even the hadiths teach that it is possible for someone to bear the sin of another, or bear the punishment for the sin of another. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Are we together?
Yes, sir.
That is actually possible for someone to bear, because that's what they teach. That a Jew or a Christian will carry the burden of the sin of a Muslim, and that will enter into paradise without sin. That's the way judgment is going to go. Inside a Muslim. So in essence, that's why I said that many times the arguments will always come back to haunt them, because there will always be a reference that attacks what you are trying to attack Christianity for. Okay? So in essence, the hadith actually teaches, that there are certain people that will pay for the sins of others. So now, you do not consider that as being wicked of Allah to do. Huh? So the actual connotation or the actual use of words is that no bearer of sin can bear no bearer of burden can bear the body of another. Because in essence, everybody has their own judgment. A bearer of burden, everybody is what has their own judgment. So that's the actual use. That no bearer of burden can bear the burden of another. But we know that case is different with Jesus, because Jesus is not a bearer of burden. He's sinless, just like we are. The Muslims agree about Isa being sinless. Of course, the Bible teaches that, right? That should be Hebrews 4:14-15, and where it says that we have no such a high priest that cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but he was at all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Okay? So we see that the solution to man's problem is what? A sinless sacrifice. And that is what Christianity and the gospel teaches. A sinless sacrifice. So it's not about how can a man bear the sins of others? No. We are talking about a sinless sacrifice. This one is, so we can see that this response, that Jesus was not just a man. Okay? Right? He wasn't just man, so he could. Because he was sinless, he was not a bearer of sin or a bearer of burden. So he could bear the burden of others. Now, it is really very funny. I'm going to skip this as well. I'm going to skip this for Believers Bible Conference. But there's something ironic that I'm going to use to round off the question 5 before we proceed to question 6. Now, the Muslims ultimately, they're trying to say that it doesn't make sense. How can it be possible for somebody to bear the sins of many people? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any logical sense. Are we together? Now, but there's something funny about Islam. How many of you know about the Hajj? Hajj, Hajj and Uruwa. Alright, talk about those pilgrimage to Mecca. That's the Hajj. Alright, now, it's very ironical when you see a Muslim accusing Christianity as being steeped in paganism. That there are some things that are connected to paganism. You know, in Believer Bible Conference 2021, the first What's So Good About Christianity, I talk about Mithras. How many of those things, like December 25, and those things, I say, those things are rooted in pagan culture, including Easter and so forth. I think of all people to make such claims, Muslims do not have a right. Number one, I've explained on the history of Islam to an extent, right? When I talk about 360 gods in Arabia, of which Allah was just one of them. I explained that in the theory of idol worship. But there's no time to do that today. But interestingly, there is this question I'm going to say, that if you ask any Muslim that is actually very vast, cannot deny, the best they can do is to try to explain it away. The many things that Muslims do today that were rooted in pagan culture, that the pagans in Mecca had always been doing so many years before Islam came to be. Ask the regular Muslim that goes, maybe any Muslim that has gone on Hajj, that has gone for the pilgrimage to Mecca. These are the major things they get to do. Ask them that the pagans at Mecca before Islam came to be, the pagans at Mecca, did they run around the Kaaba 7 times? Say yes. Say, did they run 7 times between Safa and Marwa? They say yes. Now Safa and Marwa are two. Okay, running about the Kaaba, okay, is just an act of the Muslims' act of worship. Okay, it's called the Kaaba. That is like a kind of black high box like this that they will go to run about 7 times in Mecca. Okay, it's Kaaba. I know that many Christian apologists call it the Kaaba shrine, but like Muslims don't like to agree that call it a shrine, but it's called the Kaaba. They run about it 7 times. The pagans at Mecca before Islam did it. Then they run 7 times between 2 little hills, Safa and Marwa. 7 times. The pagans before Islam came to be did it. And what's the idea of running between the Safa and Marwa 7 times? Those 6 little hills is from Islamic stories of Hajj, which they call the equivalent of the Christians' Hagar, Abraham's servant. That's that was when her son Ishmael was thirsty, and there was no water, that Agar or Aja ran 7 times between Safa and Marwa before Allah now opened her eyes to water. So that was part of their practices, running 7 times between Safa and Marwa. So the pagans did it before Islam came to be. Ask the Muslim that, maybe those that have gone on Hajj or whatever, that the pagans at Mecca before Islam came to be, that did they throw 7 stones at Wadi Mina? They say yes. Okay, sorry, I'm not writing it. I'm just trying to rush. Now Wadi Mina basically is the place is called Mina. So Wadi is like is a pillar at Mina. Sometimes there are like three pillars there about here. But basically, they throw stones or pebbles at Wadi Mina. And the idea, of course, many people have always felt that, because the idea has always been like throwing stones, stoning the devil, stoning Iblis, or the general name Shaitan, but basically Iblis. Now, but Muslims argue that that's not the idea. That the idea is actually not stoning Satan or punishing Satan. The idea is rejecting evil or rejecting temptation. That Wadi Mina or Mina was the place where God told Ibrahim, which they call our Abraham, where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son. That on 3 different occasions, 3 different places where the devil tried to tempt him, that don't do it. That's the place. So when you are throwing the stones is a way of rejecting evil and rejecting temptation. So they did. But the question is that, did the pagans at Mecca do this before Islam came to be? Yes. But Muslims do it today. In Mecca. And also, did the pagans at Mecca, before Islam came to be, did they kiss the black stone? Yes. And Muslims do that when they go to Hajj. Kiss the black stone. So you see that there's no religion steeped in paganism like Islam. I talk about the 360 gods of Arabia. I talk about many other things like that. But where I'm going ultimately to round off this question 5 is that the kissing of the black stone. The Islamic belief is that the stone was not originally black. That it was blistering and glazing. That it was bright and shining white. That was when people touch it, that their sin, it absorbs people's sins. Over time, that's how it became black. Somebody shout hallelujah. No, but that number 1, of course, we know that that's a bobo. But beyond that is the fact that, so you can believe that a stone can absorb the sin of many people. But a savior cannot bear the sins of many people. Can you see how that the arguments always come back to attack them? Can you see that? It's always coming back to haunt them. Always. Okay? So how can one man die for the sins of the world? It is possible because Jesus was not just man, like we saw. Alright? He was not just man. He was a sinless sacrifice. Or like any other man.